You know that feeling where your business starts working? You start booking more sales calls, hopping on them. It's great. But suddenly everything feels harder, heavier, and just more exhausting than when you first started, when you were broke, when you were trying to book these calls, and when you first started business 6, 12, or 24 months ago. Well, that actually happened to me too. Even after closing like nearly 150 grand in sales over about a year and a half period, I noticed going into earlier this year, I felt the same thing where I couldn't even work. Like, I couldn't even hop on a call or actually schedule them and show up when I was supposed to without some sort of resistance. So in this video, I'll show you how I built the type of resilience that makes execution as effortless as scrolling on Instagram Reels when you're supposed to be probably texting clients or hopping on calls instead. And it's going to be without forcing discipline or burning out or any of those things that you feel like you're doing right now. And then I'll break down the invisible pattern behind inconsistency in your performance in your business and why your beliefs are actually making the work feel heavy, not the work itself. Going into the spring of 2024, I was actually making a decent amount of money. I made over like 5 grand in February of 2024, and I had some clients. I was supposed to be hopping on calls, yet I was still kind of inconsistent, and there was this like bored, almost numb feeling whenever I finally did get to going to work, which wasn't very often. And even though I was making money, it almost felt like I was just procrastinating for literally no reason. And what I realized is that I continued to do that because I felt some sort of guilt or like wrongness when it came to that. Yet I still subconsciously went to the most comfortable and easiest pathway to fulfill the desires I was trying to satisfy. And in this case, it was community. And it was a sense of comfort. Even, man, before this video, there was other things going on and it was more comfortable to just sit on Instagram. But then I asked myself, am I going to let my future actions, be determined by somebody or something else going on around me? Obviously, the answer was no. So the reason why that happened to me and why this a lot of the time happens to you is the first thing that we're going to cover, step one, which is your identity. So you need to audit your identity because a lot of the times what happens is that once you get farther into business, you grow as a person, but sometimes your business doesn't grow with you because it's hard to translate that over to like, okay, I know I want to grow my business, but I also want to have a really purposeful vision for it in these different sorts of things. Then what you realize is you're a different person than when you started because you didn't start out of a logical decision because business makes the most sense and it's the least risky opportunity out there. You probably started off of some emotional impulse, which is different than what you have now. But dude, the problem is that as you're becoming a new sort of individual with more experience, you're going to run into these issues where you're trying to satisfy these newer desires in different ways. So whether it's a game of status or you really want to have this sense of community, if you can't align your business with that, you're going to have to make the trade-off of doing it somewhere else, whether it's something as simple as what you did before, which like scrolling on Instagram Reels, or it could be something a little bit more, a little bit better, like I'll be playing basketball with my friends at the gym. Whatever that might be for you, you have to at least acknowledge it. That's kind of your first step, because if you don't know how you're actualizing who you're becoming, then you're going to be stuck in this constant cycle of going to the easiest path to satisfy these desires. And in this case, the easiest path is probably the quote unquote bad habits, or even something that's like a bad behavior. So maybe you don't scroll on Instagram, maybe you kind of got rid of all these bad habits, but when you hop on sales calls, there's still a little bit of nervousness. Or you're not as structured with your objection handling because your palms start to sweat a little bit. Or maybe it's that you don't fully uphold the values you want to uphold with your clients. Like maybe you show up to calls a few minutes late. Or when you get projects done, it's done in a way that feels trapped, making you feel trapped and unmotivated. Well, this is because these behaviors are things that were learned. Because all learning is just the same behavior. I mean, is just a different behavior in the same condition. So if you're presented with this condition of like, oh, shoot, I want to be able to, I want to be able to make this money, and this money means I can have more community and higher status inside of this community. Well, the issue becomes when you need to grow your business and start signing more clients. If you continue act in alignment with your old character in fear of not being able to make this money, then you're going to stay in the same cycle. So you got to ask yourself, who am I becoming? Like, what am I actually doing? And do my current thoughts, words, decisions, and actions reflect the version of myself that I actually need to be to achieve my vision? Because even if you've dropped the quote unquote bad habits, we need to peel back the next layer. The next layer is auditing your identity and the behaviors you possess, and if that's actually aligned with the person you need to be to achieve the vision you have. Because sure, you might be committed to your business, but if you still show up in a way that isn't present and isn't focused outward in serving value into the market, then you're going to continuously be in a cycle of self-serving, and therefore you're not going to make as nearly as much money, man. And I'm sure you would like me to tell you what's the next scaling strategy to have more efficient systems in your sales process. But honestly, a lot of the time it's just about you showing up and you showing up in the right way, because people can tell. And as these people tell, they're not gonna, or they will follow by you and follow in your footsteps. So you need to understand what you need to understand is if your current behavior, so your thoughts, your words, your decisions, and your actions don't reflect the higher version of yourself who can achieve the vision you have, then your work will always feel heavy because your current self-concept is fighting against your desired output. And what I mean by your self-concept is subconsciously you identify with whatever behaviors you have. And that creates a stronger neural connection in your mind to that behavior, and meaning that this is the thing that's going to make me feel better. For example, if you hop on a sales call and you're still a little nervous, or you skip over a part of it, or you don't go as deep, and maybe you had training in the past that you should, then it's not ignorance. It's not, you don't need a new coach, or you don't need more necessarily direct training on that. What you need is to be able to identify the fact that you're shying away from these things because it's being used from your old identity as an alibi in case there is failure. So that way you can avoid that failure and your old identity could be like, yes, I'm right. We don't need to do that. We can just keep doing this. The problem is if you don't identify these things and you don't continue to audit your identity, you're going to continue to identify with those things and continue to do the same behaviors, giving you the same outcome. Because if you don't change what you do, then you're not going to change, well, how you do things. And if you don't change that, then you're not going to get a different output. As insanity is just doing the same thing over and over and over again, expecting a different result. And yes, you can do the same thing and improve it, but if it doesn't give you the results you want, and you keep doing it with no change or auditing, well, obviously you're not going to grow. So now how do you do this? Well, you need to rewire the way you look at these things, because now you know what to do, but how do you actually do that? That brings me to step 2, rewiring this belief loop. First, let me just explain what that actually is. So a belief loop consists of a belief, which is just conditions met with experience. So for example, if you're in school and your teacher says you can't use notes, you try to use the notes on a test and she takes away the test and takes away the notes, you're going to believe you can't use notes and you might not even use them again. But then if you do go to use them again, you might feel bad about the fact you used them. She would catch you, and then you wouldn't study because you keep thinking about how you tried to use the notes or you tried to cheat on the test or whatever, and then you don't do good on the test, which makes you want to use notes again. And it's just this loop of uncertainty and discomfort and a lack of motivation and all those negative things. Um, so, so understand, if you spent years avoiding discomfort, avoiding the discomfort of really preparing for your sales calls, or actually staying on script, or taking the rejection and learning from it, your brain will associate deep work or uncertainty in that moment with pain, and then there's going to be some trigger of avoidance every time. So when you hop on the next sales call, you'll maybe hop on a few minutes late. Or when you get on the sales call, you're going to have some sort of behavior like that's, to a certain degree, allowing you to have an out. Be like, oh, well, like you're subconsciously feeling, obviously, I'm not going to close this guy because of X, Y, and Z reason. So how do you identify that belief loop? Because it's probably pretty tough, especially when you're you and you're not somebody else. It's kind of hard to identify it. Well, it's just start small. Start journaling some beliefs you've subconsciously noticed. I even use ChatGPT, works fantastically. Just ask it a few questions and give it some context with like the type of person you want to become and what you're doing right now. And then try to uncover some of these beliefs you've like unconsciously absorbed. Maybe it's something in your sales process and start questioning it a little bit. Even if you think it's super solid even if you think it's super solid, I should believe this, for example, you know for sure during your sales process that you don't like taking sales calls. Or maybe you love taking sales calls. Just dig a little bit deeper into that because it'll steer you in the right direction. Because I can't tell you exactly how everything is formulated in your mind. You got to start that first. But once you do dig deeper, you can kind of start identifying and looking back at the action you took and being like, oh, at this part, this made me feel this way, which then caused this reaction, which got me into the loop. So maybe it's when you hopped on a sales call, this is your 4th sales call of the week. You haven't closed any of the other 3, or maybe you only closed 1. So then you go into this with a little bit of a negative attitude, like, oh, I don't know if I'll close this guy. I mean, I'll try. I will. Like trying to pump yourself up. But then when you hop on the call, the guy's a little not open. And you start kind of thinking, or at least subconsciously feeling like, oh, what if I don't close this? Well, I want to be able to close it. I want to be able to hit my KPIs. And I want to be able to hit my goals. And then it gets you into the loop of results-based thinking and only focusing on the outcome rather than the present moment and being present with that person and actually helping them. And then you can start identifying those sorts of things. And then once you do, instead of getting into that dip, you can build the resilience to be able to bounce right back to the state you were at, that normal state where you're confident, you're composed, and you're calm. But you can only do this when you understand where you're at, who you are, and have awareness throughout the day and bring these beliefs up to the surface. And you can reframe what you do with like, what would someone with the opposite belief do right now? Like imagine you use, and you've kind of noticed it a little bit, you use a little bit of negative self-talk. Well, then you kind of notice that on your sales calls or during your sales process, when you use that with prospects, they're a little turned away. Just ask yourself, like, what would the person who is really positive, really confident in these sorts of things, what would they do? And then once you can figure out these things, you could just start acting like that. It's going to feel uncomfortable and it's going to feel weird and you're going to want to turn away because you've built a habit of turning away from uncomfortability, but just keep going, man. Because then once you can do this, you can build that resilience tool in your mind, allowing you to be able to grow way faster. And finally, step 3 is actually building these resilient inputs. Meaning you want to change what you consume, who you learn from, how you track progress. And understand that resilience doesn't necessarily mean perfection. You don't have to be perfect at tracking, perfect at learning, or perfect at knowing exactly what to consume. But understand that everything you do consume, even to a certain degree, indulgence into your own thoughts and negative patterns, do affect the way you think and how quickly you're able to be resilient. And then, man, if you aren't resilient and you continue to dive deep into this emotional dip or spike, then you're not going to be able to effectively work because you're not present with the work. You're indulgent into the emotion in the moment. All resilience is, it just means you have enough internal alignment that you don't need this constant immediate dopamine hit to keep working. You don't need constant affirmation to understand that what you're doing can and will work as long as you have the ability to continue to put in the effort. But man, that only works if you focus on the now and are aware of who you are and who you're becoming. Because if you consistently focus on the lack of results due to your past action or past failures, then you're going to consistently reflect that into your business, keeping you stuck at maybe just a few $1,000s a month rather than being able to consistently and predictably grow. Think about resilience like Wi-Fi. And imagine you were trying to watch a podcast, right? You're driving, right? You're just listening to an Alex Hormozi podcast or maybe Modern Wisdom from Chris Williamson because he just dropped a new one, and you're on a drive and you're kind of getting far away from where you actually live. Signal starts going out. It starts buffering every couple seconds. Dude, that's going to get frustrating. And it's almost pointless because it's like, if this keeps lagging more than I can actually watch it, I'll just turn that bitch off. If that feels like you can relate to that, I mean, which I've probably had that happen before, it's the same thing with your resilience, right, in your business. Because if you are disconnected from who you're becoming, and instead you're just mindlessly going through the work and feeling like you have to brute force your way through it, come on, just grind it out, bro. Well, that works for a little bit, but it doesn't always work. If you can align your identity in your environment and consciously be aware of how you perceive things, then suddenly everything loads smooth. You don't have to force the progress. It just naturally flows like a video normally plays with good internet. Smoothly, you continue to learn, grow, and adapt without feeling this burnout, which doesn't really exist. It's more of a mechanism or a signal that just shows you're doing something wrong. So understand, once you can build this resilience through being aware and then identifying the belief loops in your life and building resilience inputs so that way you can consistently grow without having to feel immediate affirmation of your work, then you're going to be able to work like a horse without feeling like you do. And it's going to feel like you're just scrolling, man, because you're being able to progress through life just like that. If you want help identifying exactly what these belief loops are for you and your work, then click the top link in the description, follow me on Instagram, and then DM me and let me know you watched this video, and then I will get on a one-on-one call with you, and then we'll go over exactly how this works, and I can help you out, man. Peace.